Welcome back to the Tracy Take. I'm Tyler here with my brother Ryan, and today we are breaking down the Baltimore Ravens 2024 offseason. We're going to go over all the departures, the acquisitions, review their draft picks, and at the very end of the video, we're going to break down their 2024 schedule and give our record predictions. So be sure to stay tuned for the entire video. But before we get into that, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring that bell to get notified when new videos come out. We have videos coming out Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern time. And when the season starts, we're going to have weekly Ravens prediction videos for all their games, and that you're not going to want to miss. So like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Ryan, let's pull this up here. So these are the 2023 team stats for the Baltimore Ravens. They were probably throughout the entire regular season, probably the best team, I would say, from beginning to end as well.
Yeah.
Of course, they fell a little bit short. And I think they can absolutely get back there this year. I think they're going to be one of the better teams in the NFL. And so the stat to me that points out, because obviously we know how great their defense was. Obviously we know how great their running game was, and just with Lamar Jackson. The thing to me that's very unique is that they had more of an emphasis on passing the ball this season under this offense. And they were still only 21st in total passing offensive yards. And so now sacks are included in this number because this is the team offensive stats for Pro Football Reference, just to give some clarity in case if you think those numbers are a little bit off. So maybe there's a little bit more nuance there into like their overall total passing yard numbers. But I think that's what's interesting about this team is Lamar Jackson. I mean, would you say he's probably the best athlete in the league? I'm trying to think. I mean, maybe Tyreek Hill.
He's the best athlete at the quarterback position by far.
At the quarterback position. Okay, yeah.
I mean, like I would throw CMC in that conversation as well. There's a lot of great athletes, but he is definitely one of the guys
in the league. And I think what's interesting too is I think they need to give him a little bit more help in the receiving room as well, so then they can maybe even take a little bit more load off to increase this numbers, because we know they're going to be top rushing league, or a minimum top 3 in the league. As long as he's healthy, just with how well you can run the ball. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that here, kind of looking at this numbers here? Because Zay Flowers is a hit. I think he's great for that system as well. And they made some other good moves as well in the offseason that maybe help out this offense. But do you agree with that? What do you think of this team as a whole?
I think they could definitely do more to help him out in the wide receiver room. The thing that this passing rating doesn't capture is only yards. It's the efficiency for them. They were top 5 in, I feel like, every passing efficiency stat in 2023. At least it felt that way, because Lamar was going 21 of 25 for 250 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, he was.
On top of 100 plus rushing yards for another touchdown or 2. And then they were also running the football or with actual running backs for another touchdown or 2. So this was a really good offense performance. Also, they did this, I believe, without Mark Andrews for a large majority of the season because he was injured.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. I really like what this Ravens offense did. I had a lot of questions about Todd Monken coming over from Georgia, but he did a fantastic job. He is a head coaching candidate after this season for sure. And I really like what they did, especially too how balanced they were. 6 in total yards on offense, 6 in total yards allowed on defense, 6 best passing defense. I will say maybe the back end, specifically like at the corner spot, Marlon Humphreys is starting to get a little bit older, but Kyle Hamilton had a great year. But this pass rush, they led the league with 60 sacks. It definitely helped out a ton there. I don't really know if that's going to slow down a lot going forward. I don't think they lost too much on that side of the football, specifically on that front 7. But all in all, I think this defense is I don't say destined to repeat this success, but they're definitely in line looking to do so. So I really like what they have done so far. And I mean, just to kind of get it out of the way, I think this team is going to probably win this division again.
Very likely. I mean, it's amazing just year in and year out, especially now that the Browns are a lot better. Normally, I guess the Browns normally aren't that good. But like just how tough this division is. Like even now the Steelers probably being the worst team in the division, I still think they have a chance to make the playoffs as like a wild card seed as well. Even with all the changes going on over there, and for them to still probably be the favorite in this division, it says a lot to how good this team is, and just how good they are in the AFC. And so let's kind of move on now, I'll say, to their departures, because they did lose a couple key pieces, especially on the offensive line side of the ball. And that's why I think it's going to be very interesting. Starting off with John Simpson. I'll skip over Patrick Green real quick because I want to talk about Kevin Zeitler, then also Morgan Moses as well. So they're losing 3 of their starting offensive linemen as well. Morgan Moses at least played 70% of the snaps as well. And so I know he was, I think, filling in and helping out a little bit when Ronnie Stanley got hurt. But Kevin Zeitler, though, and John Simpson losing your right and left guards as well is going to be huge for this offensive line. I'm curious how big of an impact, because normally for teams that's a pretty big impact, losing 3 offensive line members that played a significant amount of snaps for the season. But kind of going back to Lamar Jackson, how elusive he is, though, teams have to protect. You almost borderline have to have a QB spy on him. So that eliminates one rusher as well. And we'll get to a guy that they added that can probably help out a bunch in the backfield as well here in a second. But then on the flip side, on the defensive side of the ball, losing Patrick Queen, Geno Stone, Jadeveon Clowney as well. I think some key pieces. Well, Jadeveon Clowney was a little bit more. He only played 56% of the snaps, but at the same time, though, still key edge rusher as well. Losing Patrick Queen also to your inside linebacker that was kind of good heart and soul, the middle chunk of that defense as well. I think they lost everybody a clear spot with Clowney, Stone, and then also Queen as well at every point in the defensive line or in the defensive line.
So at the beginning of the offseason, I felt the Patrick Queen loss was a big loss. But actually, after looking at some of the statistics, Roquan Smith was actually the lead linebacker for them. So while losing Patrick Queen is definitely still a loss, they're not losing the green dot on the defense that I thought they were, because I think Roquan Smith is going to kind of fill in for some of those duties as well and allow another guy to step up and fill in there as well, hopefully with a similar impact. Jadeveon Clowney was more of a situational pass rusher who got to 10 sacks last year, just because I think this defense, with how they played, it fit his style, and so they kind of allowed him to do that. Some of the other guys like Gus Edwards, Odell Beckham, a lot of the other guys were more just rotational players. For them, Odell Beckham had an impact, but I think it'll be replaceable come this year. Especially, I think they were very efficient in the passing game, but getting into their additions, I think if you look, they brought in a few guys, but the main one being Derrick Henry. That is just going to be an absolutely disgusting backfield. Lamar Jackson can knife you up. He's the most one of the most elusive runners in the league. And then Derrick Henry is just an absolute battering ram. So I think imagine him getting 200 carries in this offense plus whatever Lamar Jackson gets, because they were running the ball a decent bit with Gus Edwards and whoever else they could pull off the street, because the running backs would drop like flies. And they were running the ball a ton with those guys. And then Lamar was getting the scramble carries plus some organized touches. And then they're throwing the ball about 25 times a game also. So definitely going to be a fair share of touches for Derrick Henry in this offense. Josh Jones, I think, can go and replace some of what Morgan Moses did as well. But also, they're going to put defenses on their heels. They're going to have to stay in their rushing lanes. They're not going to be able to pin their ears back, and that is really going to help out this offensive line a ton as well.
Yeah, no, the big thing, obviously, again, Derrick Henry, because I can see a lot of RPO actions going on, because there's just going to be so much attention on both those guys. Yeah, and then this is where I think you adding Zay Flowers, I think, is going to help out a bunch, just because with his speed and how well he works, I think he's going to improve even so much more in the sophomore season. Is you can see him, I can see him streaking across the field as well during an RPO, and if he's open, Lamar Jackson's going to throw it to him. If not, hand off to Derrick Henry, or he can scramble for himself. Yeah. So I just think there's going to be a lot of options. I think you're just going to put defenses in a pickle, which I think you can almost maybe now pencil in Baltimore being the number one rushing team in 2024 season now. I think just talking about it. I will say with the draft picks, just to touch up on a couple, I do like the Nate Wiggins pick and Roger Rosengarten. I think those are good value for picking so late in the draft. I am curious on Ted Walker and also TJ Tampa to see how well they can help improve. Yeah. The receiving room, also the secondary as well, because they lost a couple pieces on both sides of the ball. And so just curious to see how the draft picks too. But I think all things considered, normally when you're picking that late in the draft, each round, I think they got some good value for all their picks.
Yeah, no, we haven't talked in this series too much about some of the draft picks, but I do definitely want to touch. I definitely think they needed to get younger in the secondary. They got TJ Tampa and Nate Wiggins, who I had both of those guys in the top 50 on our big board. Roger Rosengarten was, I think, also around 50 at the offensive tackle. So you replace another offensive lineman there, plus Josh Jones. Adisa Isaac was the edge rusher opposite of Chop Robinson. Has some better physical tools, but maybe isn't quite as explosive as Chop Robinson was. And then Tez Walker I had as a top 75 guy going in. So you look at those top 5-6 picks, and they did a really good job, I think, of getting value and getting guys that can come in and contribute. And I'm really excited to see where they end up on their roster.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting. I think there's some unique things, I think, looking at their depth chart here and some key areas to watch, just because going back to their offensive line if you want to move on to the offensive depth chart here now. Yeah, the offensive line thing is going to be very fascinating to watch here, because Andrew Voorhees, last time we saw him, unfortunately, he was getting hurt at the combine in 2023, and so they got him in the 7th round. But he was going to be a top 100 pick if it wasn't for his injury. And then you see Roger Rosegard now sliding in at the right tackle. I think how this offensive line meshes together, and also, too, if I'm not mistaken as well, I know I said this earlier, but I guess just to confirm, but Ronnie Stanley was dealing with injuries kind of on and off throughout the season. Right?
Yeah.
That's why Morgan Moses was getting a lot of playing time. So if he's not healthy, because that's something that he's kind of been nagging with a little bit during his time there, I'm curious to see how this offensive line gets put together. Now, Lamar Jackson is, as we've mentioned already, one of the most athletic guys, by far the most athletic quarterback. And so maybe having a weaker offensive line, he can kind of neutralize that. But still, I'm just curious how they're going to be able to rebuild some of that protection for him as well. And then also too, just kind of how this receiving room gets put together, because they did get Tez Walker as well. Then they have Nelson Aguilar and Rashad Bateman still, but they've been fine at best, I would say. I think Rashad Bateman could be a little bit better, but he seemed like he always just like a little banged up. All the time. So
he had a few good games in his sophomore year, but then he kept pulling hamstrings and stuff. But I liked Zay Flowers in last year's draft. Nelson Aguilar, I think, as a wide receiver 3 is an interesting option. I really hope Tez can stick to this roster, because I think that would be really interesting.
He's going to have opportunities for sure.
Yeah, for them. So all in all, like the offense, I think they're going to run. I believe it's 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets with Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. Get Derrick Henry in that backfield. That is a lot of meat on that offensive line. And then you got Derrick Henry running behind it. And so it'll be interesting. And then they can still burn you with Lamar, with Zay, right? They have a lot of speed there on that with that group. So let's move on to the defensive depth chart here. So not a whole lot here. Justin Madubuike is there. Michael Pierce, Broderick Washington, Odafe Owe. The big difference, Trenton Simpson slotted in at the right inside linebacker in Patrick Queen's old spot. Roquan Smith is still there. Kyle Van Noy. And then this is where we start to get into the rookies. You have Nate Wiggins, TJ Tampa there, Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, Marlon Humphrey still on the other side as well. So I like that they went out and got a bunch of depth here in the secondary. I think that was one area where they really could improve on this team. And I still think they're going to get a lot of good sack production out of these like rotational guys outside of Justin Madubuike, Broderick Washington, Michael Pierce. So all in all, I think they did a good job of replacing and like restarting in certain areas, while moving on from older contracts, letting younger guys kind of fill in and cover that space on this defensive side. And I really think that they're destined to repeat as one of the top defenses in the league.
Yeah. Because even though they moved on from some key guys, I agree with you though. I still think they drafted well. They have good young talent. They developed the talent well. And it's kind of almost similar. There's just something I think about, like the Ravens or then also the Steelers, like just like that style, just like that system that they have built up over the past couple of decades, where it's like they know what Baltimore Ravens football is, especially in their defensive style, and those are the kind of guys that they go and get. They almost have like a formula for developing just great defenses, and so I feel confident that they're going to replace any of the production from the guys that moved on easily, and they're getting younger in the process, which is kind of scary to think about too. So. Yeah. I agree with you. I think a lot more of the questions, I don't even want to say questions, but I think interesting matchups and like roster making the roster fights for the on the starting lineup are going to be on the offensive line side, going to be in the receiving room as well. Just seeing kind of what that offense shapes up to be, because we know the base. I mean, we know Lamar Jackson's going to be there. We know Derrick Henry's going to be there, Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers. But is there going to be somebody that can kind of rise the ranks, maybe like have really developed from last year as well to take a starting spot and moving forward? Those are going to be the things that I think that are going to be fun to watch on the matchup for matchups here coming into the 2024 season. But anyways, let's move on now to the 2024 schedule here and quickly kind of go over how we think the Ravens are going to do this year. So starting off, going up against, unfortunately, the team that beat them in the AFC Championship, Kansas City, on Thursday Night Football in Week 1. That's going to be a great game, potential preview to the AFC Championship that we'll see come late January. But then they go host Las Vegas, at Dallas, Buffalo on primetime, at Cincinnati, and then hosting on Washington. And then hosting Washington. I'll say pretty tough start to the schedule here, especially then too going to my point of them trying to figure out their offensive line issues. Well, I'll say going up against Kansas City Week 1, that's always going to be tough as well, Super Bowl champs. And I think that they even improved off of last year as well. But then the point I was going to make looking at Vegas, they probably have the best defensive line in the league, if not the best, like top 5. They're going to be going up against an offensive line that's still going to be trying to gel together as well. So curious to see how they do there. But in Dallas, I mean, like on paper, Dallas is going to regress a little bit, but still has a lot of talent. Buffalo, I think, on the same thing, kind of maybe regress a little bit, but still a lot of talent. Same thing with Cincinnati. So those are 3 games that I think they'll probably be favored, but they're still going to be really, really tough matchups in my opinion. And Washington, they should beat Washington.
Yeah, and that's these are tough games, but they should win most of these. The Kansas City Week 1. If Kansas City starts like they did against Detroit last year, I think Baltimore will blow them out of the water. But that'll be a tough game. It is interesting. They got a lot of good pass rushes to start off. Kansas City has a good pass rush. Las Vegas, Dallas, Buffalo, those were all top 10 pass rushes last year. And then you kind of get into, I think, the second column here. Starting off, I think, with an easier game at Tampa Bay. Then you get into their division matchup against their first division matchup against Cleveland. And then that should be tough. They should destroy Denver, Cincinnati on Thursday Night Football, at Pittsburgh, at the Chargers. Then they host Philly, and then they have their Week 14 bye. So a late bye for this team, but if you're hoping for that late playoff push, not necessarily a bad thing. This middle column, they should be favored in most of these games. At Cleveland, maybe, depending on how good Cleveland is at that point in the season. But realistically, I think they should be favored in just about all of these games.
They should be. I mean, they're the AFC conference regular season champs from last year. I mean, most of these teams, It's once again, I said this during the Pittsburgh Steelers video as well. It's still the AFC North. Like these teams still beat each other. Like Pittsburgh last season was probably the worst team if it wasn't also for Joe Burrow getting hurt. They still went 5-1 in the division. So you never know kind of with these overall matchups. Like I agree with you, they have some favorable matchups, like Denver, for example. They should be favored against Tampa Bay and the Chargers as well, potentially even Philly. So like for their non-division games, but there's still a couple of tough games, and those teams have a lot of question marks. And Tampa Bay too, they had a good season last year, and they retained a lot of the main guys. So you never know and they're gonna have an extra day to prep for them. So is Baltimore as well. So just vice versa also. But you never know. But I agree with you. This middle portion of the season is not horrible. I will say. And then when the final 4 games as well, because they have a late bye, they can make a strong push. But then at New York, then they host Pittsburgh on Saturday, and then play Houston on Christmas and wrap things up hosting Cleveland as well. I think that's going to be a pretty interesting stretch on those final 2 games because a lot of playoff implications I feel are going to be taking place there on Christmas and then also Week 18.
Yeah, I do love the setup so that you get a late bye, then you get a cupcake tune-up game in Week 15 against the Giants, and then you get a short-ish week against Pittsburgh. So stepping up in competition, then you have to go at Houston, which is a tough matchup, and then Cleveland. Both tough matches to close out the season. But you get the bye week, then you get kind of the tune-up games going into the final 2 games. So all in all, I think this schedule is fairly favorable for them. Let's get into our record predictions. So I have them winning the division based off of tiebreakers. I actually had the Bengals, the Browns, and the Ravens at 12-5, but the Ravens win off of tiebreakers. And so here at 12-5, win the division. They're probably the 1 or the 2 seed, depending on where Kansas City ends up and who wins that week 1 matchup, which could have some pretty big playoff implications in September. And so I really like this team. I think they're going to be the rushing leader, as you said. They were one of, if not the most efficient passing offense last year. And this defense doesn't really look to have regressed too much at the very least. If not, they stayed the exact same or maybe improved if some of these young guys can really catch on.
Yeah, so I have something similar. I have them going 11-6. It really is. I think they're going to be. They're not winning the division. They're probably going to be the 5 seed. I think it's just going to be depending on just how the tiebreakers might work. And so I actually have both the Browns and Ravens going 11-6 here. So that Week 18 matchup is going to be huge. If I'm right on this, and so I think they're just going to have one of those typical seasons where I think they're going to be one of the top seeds or just one of the top teams in the AFC. Obviously, they're going to lose some games. They're going to lose some division games just because it's the AFC North. There's going to be some games like maybe they beat Kansas City week 1, but then for some reason they lose to Buffalo in week 4. It's just how that the NFL works. Like they're all still professional. So I still think they're going to be one of the top teams. Maybe if they don't win the conference, but they win the division, they'll be the 2 or 3 seed. It's just you look at that schedule. I will say even for a team that went to the AFC Championship, I don't think it's that tough of a schedule for a conference leader. Obviously, you're going to be the AFC North, and so that obviously is going to have a big impact on the overall strength of the schedule and well. But I look at some of the other teams that are playing, it's like I still feel like they're going to be favored in a lot of these games.
Well, they got the AFC West, which outside of Kansas City, none of the teams made the playoffs last year.
Yeah. Raiders might be the best in their average overall.
And then they got the AFC or the NFC East, who Philadelphia finished weak. Dallas is wounded after they lost so much this offseason. And then the Giants and Washington are not that great. That's 7 of their 17 games. And then they have obviously the 6 division games and whatnot. But all in all, I really think that this is a good year for Baltimore. This might be my early Super Bowl pick if I had to pick a team in the AFC to represent. I just think they got better on the offensive side of the ball. They didn't really lose too much without replacing it. And then Derrick Henry is a huge upgrade in that running back room. And then this defense, they lost Jadeveon Clowney, Patrick Queen, and Geno Stone. Yes, but they went out, they drafted Adisa Isaac. Kyle Van Noy can hopefully replace some of that production. This secondary, they drafted a bunch of young guys to come in and compete for spots there as well. So then the only guy they didn't replace was Patrick Queen. So all in all, I think it was a successful offseason for the Baltimore Ravens. They should be right back in the position that they were in last year, and that is to go to a Super Bowl.
Yeah. I still think they're going to be one of the favorites, and it's going to be fun to see how they can reproduce the season that they had last year. But maybe go a little bit farther this time for y'all, Baltimore fans.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and wrap it up here. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below on what you thought of the Baltimore Ravens 2024 offseason. Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you have done differently? What do you think their record will be? And that we'll see you guys next time.